Welcome back, everyone. The next session is a discussion on Majoritarian Myth, how unscientific social theories create disharmony. We invite on stage Professor Kausik Gangopadhyay, economist, Professor IIM Kozhikode and author, and Deep Halder, journalist and author.
Hello, everybody settled in? So imagine you are driving a big car on the road. Some of you won't have to imagine, I'm sure some of you drive big cars on the road. But imagine you're driving the car now and you are driving it perfectly within discipline. And suddenly out of nowhere, breaking all traffic rules, a small car comes and hits you. Okay? Now the cop comes and pulls you out of your car, takes you to the police station, but you plead innocence. You say, but I haven't done anything. I was just driving normally on the road. This small car has come and hit me, and that's why there is an accident. But the cop looks at you and says, oh no, you are at fault because you are driving the big car. So that, according to my friend Professor Gangopadhyay, is the majoritarian myth. That's what's happening to Hindus in India because they are in majority. Every time there's a social discord, there is a problem between communities, Hindus are pushed to a corner, they're pointed a finger at, simply because they are the majority community. That is what he says is the majoritarian myth. Now, Professor Gangopadhyay, thank you for writing this book. I'm sure it was not an easy task getting a theory like this out for the public. In my simplistic head, this is how I understood the essence of your book. Would you like to expand on the idea? What is the majoritarian myth?
So, namaskar, and thank you particularly Alodi for calling me here, and Deep, thank you for reading my book. So the idea, this majoritarianism, it is essentially coming what I call cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism is a European phenomenon. It happened in Germany, Frankfurt School, a group of academicians. They developed these theories. And of course there's Antonio Gramsci, who was the leader of the Italian Socialist Party. His writings, his prison notebooks, they actually immensely contributed to development of this theory. So how did it go? So essentially, if you look at communism, it was dying in Europe. Why was it dying? Because the atrocities from Russia, Siberia, they are all surfacing up, right? Gulag, what happened, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he has very insightful books. So what these guys have done in the Marxian theory, there's a term, technical term he uses, base and superstructure. So the base is economics. So this production process, that's the base. So to change society, Marx says you have to change the economics. And that's how the idea of the socialist state comes along. But if you look at cultural Marxism, the base is not economics. The base is cultural identities. In the economic Marxism, any problem happens, it is always the bourgeoisie who is sort of guilty, right? The proletariat is always sort of nice. They can't do any wrong. Same thing is Gramsci is saying here. He talks about the hegemony, right? Hegemony wise, a group has hegemony, and they are always there. Any individual conflict, the person with the group identity, with the hegemonic group identity, is always guilty, right? Person with a group identity of the non-hegemonic group identity is always innocent. And then it is translated. The majority, they are having sort of the hegemony, and that's why they are always the guilty, irrespective of the actual facts or irrespective of actually what happens. So this is how this theory got developed over time. Yeah, please.
Okay. So on the question of caste, I want you to spend some time on talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
who do you think addresses or have addressed caste till now better? Cultural Marxism in the Indian context or Hindutva?
That's a very profound question. And it has a profound answer is there in Aravindan Neelakandan ji, his book, Hindutva. So if you look at this idea of this caste, so it is a very nuanced concept. We all have our identities in a way, right? Now we are gotten rid of the old caste, but new caste systems are there. Here in the last 2-3 days, I'm talking to different people, right? And now you can actually measure it up. Who is conversing with whom or all these kind of things, right? You will see there is sort of a thing. I'm an academician, academic, I'm talking about the fellow academics more. Journalists are talking with the journalists more. Defense persons are talking to the defense person more. So this is not a human nature. We like to talk to more about the people we share our domain expertise, our knowledge with, our experience of the world with. Caste or jati, as it is usually called, that actually grew nothing more than that. It was a very flexible sort of thing, and it was a, so I have, it is a, you can have a 3-day workshop on caste itself. So I won't stretch it too long, but I'm just giving you the broad synopsis. It was basically a very flexible thing, and when we were the big people, when Bharat was the big people, and we are expanding, we included people. So there are people who came from the outside, right? Sakas, Hunas. They are included in our society as Kshatriyas, right? In our northwestern or western sort of provinces. So we are kind of inclusive in that sense. We are not excluding people. But then came our days of misery. We are being colonized. A big colonization for a millennia. And that time, what we are shrinking. And then we are shrinking, then what will happen that we will sort of increase the misery and become very rigid about these identities. So it is a very nuanced thing. Now, if you look at the current context, of course, the question you are saying Hindutva. So
Hindutva versus cultural Marxism,
right? So Hindutva always they want to create a society, a powerful society, and they understand one thing: there is no unified society, there is no powerful society without the unity of the people. So naturally, if you look at just the theory-wise, Hindutva will be more sort of appreciative of forging and caste unity, right? You can go back to Savarkarji. He was the first person who said, no, the untouchability has to be removed, and all the mass sort of the where people sit together and dine together. So all the people from different castes. So he kind of started all these things in the initial days. If you look at the cultural Marxist, I think people will hate me in a way, but they all are coming from the upper caste, and they all are having very limited understanding about the dynamics of caste. They are understanding coming from the theory. On the other hand, there are people who are coming from lower caste. They are very successful. I give a name, Meghnad Saha. Meghnad Saha was coming from a lower caste, right? East Bengal, right? And he got very discriminated for his caste when he was a student. The accounts which would bring tears to your eyes. But what happened? In his own lifetime, Meghnad Saha became a very accomplished person in Bengal. People are looking up to him. Not only his own caste, all Bengalis, they are looking up to him. They are worshipping him. And when the partition of Bengal happened, and there is a very good speeches of Meghnad Saha in parliament. He won from parliament, Lok Sabha, and then he made very good speeches. And he said basically these communist policies and these Nehruvian policies, they are becoming a big failure. They are creating miseries, not only for people of his caste, but for all the Hindus. So in a way, you can see where we are heading towards.
You should all look up Meghnad Saha. It's interesting he mentions him. Meghnad Saha was a brilliant scientist from Bengal. He was particularly hated by Pandit Nehru. In fact, one time Meghnad Saha told Nehru that in time, in history, people will forget a cancelled politician like you, but they'll remember a cancelled scientist like me. So it's very interesting. Professor Gangopadhyay is mentioning him. But let me ask this to you straight. Do you think cultural Marxism actually leads to conversions? If you push the idea of cultural Marxism, it destabilizes the Hindu structure and it leads more to conversions.
So I'll tell you what happens. This cultural Marxism, now incidentally, if you do it in Google now, there is a Wikipedia article that will come. It says this is a conspiracy theory. Few years ago in Wikipedia there was a very big article on this with very well referenced one. But cultural Marxists got so powerful, from the Wikipedia they have cancelled this article. And instead they inserted the article of cultural Marxism as a conspiracy theory. Now let me tell you this. There is a very preeminent Polish scholar, Leszek Kolakowski. And Leszek Kolakowski has a very seminal book, The Main Currents of Marxism. And this is published 1977-78, Oxford University Press, 3 volumes. And there he categorically mentions these ideas that I am saying, this Gramsci, this Frankfurt School, as extension of the Marxist thinking in the cultural domain. So this is a very well acknowledged theory, well acknowledged understanding, 50 years, preeminent scholars, but in Wikipedia they have cancelled it because they got so powerful. It actually shows the amount of intolerance the cultural Marxism has. Now if you are talking about the conversions out of Hindu or something like that, I do not particularly have a very strong Hindu identity. I consider more or less myself on the atheist front. But what I don't want, so I do not want to happen an India where 100% people are Hindu. But what I don't want to happen, and which cultural Marxism is facilitating, is having an India where nobody sees herself inheritor of the most sustainable civilization of the world history. A civilization that has catered to diversity for millennia. If you look at Ramayana, all the tribes that are mentioned, that were still present today. And this happened because we have this wonderful civilizational structure. That structure, they are trying to break it, because they hate all existing structures. Does cultural Marxists or the liberals, do they really cater to, do they really love diversity? Do they cater to diversity? There is a very famous American thinker, Thomas Sowell. He said 50 years ago, show me one Republican in the sociology departments of US universities, right? So Republicans, 50% of the society, right? They're coming from the same society. Sociology department, there is no sociologist who calls himself or herself Republican, right? Now liberal takeover happened of the academia, US academia. If you go to the US academia or US media community, less than 10%, after just a few years of liberal takeover, less than 10% of them, they call themselves law liberals. And these are like old people, right? There are very, very original thinkers among them, like Jordan Peterson, Gad Saad, and they are actively being cancelled by the liberals. So you can see what cultural Marxism is leading to. It is leading to an illiteracy about culture. It is leading to a situation when we do not know what our identity is. We are all rootless people. And the imperialists, they love rootless people. That's what it is. That's, I think, I'll just ask for the next question to follow it up.
Before that, Glory, you are platforming too many atheists at Pondy Lit Fest. Shiva Rur, Anand Ranganathan, now Professor Ganguly. Sorry? Dangerous trend. You should check your list next year. You have a scientific mind, Professor Gangopadhyay. Tell us, how do we get out of this majoritarian myth you're talking about? I know how difficult it is for me to write the kind of books I write. I've been a journalist in Delhi for better part of my career. I know the constant pressures to adhere to a certain kind of ism. So how does one get out of the majoritarian myth and what it forces us to do?
It is a very sort of a personal engagement. My maternal grandfather, he was a whole-timer in the Communist Party. My father was communist for a quite long time of his life. He became a lapsed one. But and I am sort of thankful. I dedicated my book to my father for that reason, probably.
This book also goes to cultural Marxists.
So what I would say that when I grew up, I mean, most of my relatives, they were like leftists. And because my grandfather was there, I used to listen to these base superstructure theories when I was 6. Yeah, so I know these theories inside out. But what I like to see things, what is the consequence, not what does it say. If I see the consequence, West Bengal, forgive me if I'm a parochial, but it was the best province of India 100 years ago. Bengal, I would say. Now it is, I don't want to use the word, but it is definitely not one of the best ones. Definitely not in Indian domain. How did it happen? It happened because the communists, they took over the entire intellectual space, the entire cultural space. That's how it has happened. And now I see it being replicated all over India. So I was sort of very aghast with the consequences. And I saw it is coming from the academia, from the academic theories. Thankfully, while I was young, I was still not very impractical. So I did not try to do a PhD in a sociology department and change it. That would have been disastrous for myself and for writing this book. I took a parallel path in economics where you are exposed to social theories to an extent, but you of course can go by your empirical understanding and can survive the day based on what you write on empirical understanding. So from that way I started my career, and I did it as a second job to study these theories and bring out the weakness in them. It took time, it took lot of time, it took more than a decade, but it finally has happened as one book I have come out with. The most important book, I say, from India. Others could happen if people feel there is a need for that. So this is the personal journey that way. Now if you are coming back to science, I'll tell you something. I mean, I love a lot of liberal arts people and there are very fine people among them. But there is a problem there. The problem is that the scientific acumen, it is much less is talked by the scientists. It is far more talked by the people who are coming from the liberal arts background.
Why are you attacking me here? I'm your friend.
No, I'm just talking about the academics, and it is not actually my attack. It is the attack by Richard Feynman, a very fine physicist he was, and he said these social sciences, they call them sciences, so they must adhere to the standards of a science. You cannot do would you call a Christian science a science? Then social science is a science, no problem. But would you really want to call it a science by the way we understand physics or biology or chemistry? Then there is a big problem. The baseline of science is not what sounds pleasant, but what actually happens. I'll give you an example, real example from the science. So there was a myth in the medieval age. If you drop two objects, one heavy, one light. If the heavier object, let's say 100 kg, this is 1 kg. The 100 kg will fall 100 times faster than 1 kg. It sounds nice to all of us. When I was young, 6, I also believed in it. Right? It is an Aristotelian theory, survived for more than a millennia. Right? Because it sounded nice. But the empirical test was done by Galileo Galilei, right? He dropped two objects from this Tower of Pisa, right? Leaning Tower of Pisa, and he just sort of proved it, that both of them are striking together. So although it does not sound very nice that two objects, heavy and light, they will sort of fall together, but that is actually the case. Similarly, when we say this majoritarianism, intolerance, so many words, what I'll say that they sound nice, but they don't hold true in the light of reality. So if I have to write a book supporting majoritarianism, I have to do 1/10 of the effort I took me. The first 3 chapters of my book, they contain my opinion. Opinions can be written, not that difficult. It only requires to know English. But if you want to write about science, you need to go back to the data and see whether your theory holds true to data. So I have taken their theory very, very seriously and I tested them. And I shown that my theory performs much better in the light of the data available to me. I have used genocide data, I have used population proportion data, and all those are done in a very rigorous, I would say, pardon my immodesty, scientific way. That's how we have done it.
A personal, deeply personal question. Should I then stop writing books?
No, I actually don't have anything against you or against the liberal arts per se. Liberal arts, I think, is a wonderful thing. And I am actually worried about the cultural illiteracy of the technocrats. They have a very good idea about a small domain, but they don't have the idea of the big picture. The big picture must always be understood. And that's what the wonderful people like you are doing, to let us know what the big picture is.
Let me ask you about this 2 objects, one heavy, one light, landing together. So modern Bengal is like the heavy object, his head filled with heavy theories, but not even landing. So what happens to Bengal? It's a province I understand you don't like anymore, but I happen to stay there quite often. My parents are there. So what happens to the Bengali? What happens to the partitioned, deracinated Bengali mind? What is a scientific way of dealing with it?
Yeah, it is also a very deeply personal question. Because my parents also lived there. My father just passed away a few months ago. But otherwise, my mother is still there and so many of my relatives. I used to be in formal conversation, give my opinion freely to them 20 years ago. They used to call me conspiracy theorist in their own Bengali way. They don't anymore. Because they don't see what I predicted for my little town and neighborhood. All these things are coming true. So in a way, I am happy that in a predictive power wise, I have proven right to them. But that's how I am also very afraid. Because this predictive power takes Bengal right to the Bangladesh way. And Bangladesh right to the Afghanistan way. How many years it will take, that's a matter to debate, discuss, understand. But that's the big picture.
You have debunked the majoritarian myth. So what is your message to the minorities? How should they be looking at society, looking at engagement in a secular democratic society with the majoritarian population?
So like I said, I don't want to see in India with 100% Hindu. So I repeat the message that Gandhiji said. Let Hindus be Hindus, Muslims be Muslims, Christians be Christians. But my message is something more. It does not stop there. I say there is something called the linear theory. When imperialisms happen for a sustained period of time, it does not happen because of some personal reason or personal greed. It happens more than that. It happens because there is a theory. There is a social theory, which I call linear theory. If you believe in a linear theory, it sees a phenomenon starting growing over time. Actually, this term is not my term. It is a sociological term, although they don't associate it intolerance necessarily. I have documented it. It has been also been used by Yuval Noah Harari in his book Sapiens. He said that basically Christianity started this idea of the linear theory. They see a linear history, right? Jesus is the first Christian and they will grow and grow and grow, right? Now this linear theory can never bring any peace to the world. What it will create, it will create tensions, it is not in favor of a sustainable world. That is why if you go through these theories eventually stop, right? You know, what if the globe becomes communist? Well, what if everybody becomes Christians? And then the judgment day will happen, right? It has to sort of stop there. You can't have a sort of a sustainable world, right, anymore. So these linear theories are a big problem. Now what happens, the Europeans, they have discovered secularism out of their own civilizational experience. And I'll give you the reason. The European world, it was a Christendom. There was no nation in a way. And they were seeing the message of Christianity, it has to be taken everywhere in a very linear theory way. It hurt them the most. There was a big bloodshed happened in the medieval Europe. In the 17th century, about 8 million people perished, all Christians, because of their denominational rivalry. And eventually they understood from their experience that these theories will not lead to any peace. So they have these Westphalian treaties, and they sort of said, well, we will not take this very seriously. We will relegate them from our governance structure. And this is the idea of secularization, right, of the European polity. It started there from the Westphalian times. Now what happens? Their prescription is little wrong. They identified Christianity in the governance structure as a problem. But that's not the problem. The problem is actually the presence of the linear theory. The moment you disconnect Christianity and governance, the linear theories are reborn in their secular avatars. This is how the communism, the Nazism, and the liberalism. Incidentally, Harari, he bracketed all them three as modern religions in his book Sapiens, chapter 12. Right? So these linear theories are reborn. And these theories between themselves killed tens of millions of people in the 20th century. Liberalism, it has done less compared to them now, but when they will get more and more power, we'll just see what happens. Now, these linear theories are the problem, not the problem of basically having religion in the polity per se. So my message is what Pope Francis is saying to the Christians, same message. It is that let us accept all paths as equal paths in a sustainable universe. Let us follow your path, and it gives you hope, if it gives you strength in your life. I have everything, my support for you. Just reform yourself and get the linear theories out. That is the way. It is the same message Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, he is giving to his countrymen and possibly to Muslims of the other countries. We don't want to live in a world where we are perceived as having a linear theory of imperialism. We want to live with the others in a very sustainable way. That same message I want to give it to everyone. Not only the Muslims, Christians or any minorities, but also communists and liberals. Don't take your theory that seriously and try to be imperialistic on others. As a matter of fact, I think liberalism is the most active linear theory now. Not Muslim, not Christianity. If you go to an average Muslim, average Christian, if you ask them, do you consider yourself, Muslim in the street, do you consider yourself superior only because you are a Muslim? I think my bet will be a lot of them would say no. We are good because we do good. But if you go to the most erudite liberal, you ask this question, do you consider yourself best because you are a liberal? He will say, yes, of course. I am the best because I am the liberal. You can't be a good because if you are not the liberal.
Let me turn this around. I was just doing an interview with Ami Ganatra, and every time I speak to her or hear her, I'm amazed at how deeply rooted she is to our culture and tradition. Would you say, given in the current context, the majority community in India, it it is, and you're an atheist, most of us should rediscover our roots, our cultural moorings, in order to fight liberalism or communism, or the majoritarian myth, as you say.
So very fine idea. So basically in our book I have tackled it. There are two kinds of social views. Understanding about society, how it should be governed. And this view is not coming from exactly me. There are greater people before me. One is S.N. Balgangadhara, a very stalwart. He has a book, Hidden in His Blindness. There is another thinker I already mentioned, Thomas Sowell. He has a book. The book is called, I got it. It is called Conflict of Two Visions. And there is also another economist. His name is Stephen Marglin. He is coming classical left background. He has a book, The Dismal Science. So all these three places in different nomenclatures, this has been told. So there are two kinds of social views. One view is this theory-oriented view, the view that is very popular in academia. So you posit a theory and you think that theory governs the world. And then you think everything revolves around that theory. The other view is little modest view. You think that we don't know that much. A small person, small limited experience among more than 8 billion living individuals. Forget about all the past generations, thousands, maybe more than thousands, maybe lakhs of generations, if you start from the original beginning of this human species. Our understanding is very limited. Don't try to universalize it. Try to remain empiric. Try to remain accepting of the other's views. And this is called conservatism. Conservative does not say whatever happened in the past are all good. No, that's not the idea of conservatism. It says you cannot delink yourself from the past. So other people who came before me, my grandfather, my grandfather, my grandfather was a communist. Was he wrong? No. He was probably absolutely as right as me in his experience, in his time. But that should not mean that I am also wrong by contesting his theory, his understanding, right? So similarly, you have to be accepting towards your forefathers. And once you understand that acceptance, you understand whatever has happened in this society has happened for a reason. It has not happened because our forefathers were bigoted people, they are prejudiced people. No, that's not the case. You have to be sort of tolerant about them. And then you will go to this view, this conservative view, right? And the moment you come up with this conservative view, then you understand that you have to take lesson from history. You cannot recreate a new human species today. So this is the idea of conservatism, and this is why we should have to listen to our traditions. Now let me tell you a little bit about myself, because you're talking about atheism. I am an atheist, but I am a big fan of one Vedic philosophy which is called Sankhya. It is an atheistic philosophy. There is no God in it. It centrally revolves around a term. In Sanskrit we call it Dvanda. It is called dialecticalism, right? This Hegel's dialecticalism is basically comes from Sankhya. He has an article also on Sankhya. So basically then Marx basically took it over, class struggle, the same idea. I like the original version, the Sankhya version of it. And it actually allows me to explain the social phenomena very well without really need for a God to have here. So that's why I don't see the God, necessity for the God. I am happy without God. If I really see a strong necessity for it, I'll go with it. I'm an empiricist.
A good time to ask this question. My friend Dr. Anand Ranganathan has also walked in. Your quick tip to people like me who have unfortunately not been blessed with a scientific bent of mind, what should they do to sort of write serious books? Because every time Dr. Ranganathan speaks or writes, I'm very afraid I think it'll put me out of business. So you have written, and this is a wonderful book, and he's a friend, so I've been joking around a bit with him, but it's a wonderful book. Please pick it up. I know I'm going to take a lot of notes from it. I already have, and I'm going to apply this to anything else I'm writing henceforth. But your quick tips to people from the liberal arts discipline who wants to write serious books, not fiction but non-fiction.
Achha, so basically I started my book with an empiricism. So what the liberal studies background they should do, they should look at the data, right. and then the reality will unshackle your mind. That's what I'm going to say. So what I did a survey of 3 years of data from the global media, not Indian media, global media. I looked in, this is a database, very famous database, Global News Stream Services. And I have put up the data in my web page, along with the slides, full slides of the book. So I am telling everyone, do criticize me, do attack me as best as you can. I would love it. It will be in the interest of science. Now, if you look at this data, I looked into the seminal newspaper articles there, and then I looked at the terms majoritarian and majoritarianism, and I found how many of them associate a particular majority, right, in the context of the article. So I found 80% of the cases, more than 80%, it is about India, Hindus of India. They are the majoritarians, they are the creators of the global problem, right? And more than 8% about the Buddhists of Sinhala and Hindus and Buddhists of our zone, right? So basically, we are the 90% of the problems of the world. So I'll give you an analogy, and this will open your mind. There is a very staunch, notorious imperialist in the 20th century. His name was Winston Churchill. He was very disdainful about India, and he was asked about India, and he said, Indians are a beastly people with a beastly religion. What the modern liberal through this data is saying, Indians are an egregiously intolerant people because they are having, the majority of them are having an intolerable Hindu identity. So you can see how Churchill comes right into the picture.
I think we should take some questions at this time.
Dr. Kausik, thanks for the wonderful session, really enlightening. My question is that now these liberals have metamorphosed themselves into something called as woke and whatnot more, and eating up the civilization's culture like anything. We have understood the problem time and again, but what is the solution out of this mess?
So I have actually dealt with this. So there are two ways to deal with it. One is a broad societal level. The phenomenon of wokeness, it is happening because we believe in a very theory-driven world. Equality, fraternity. So these words are theoretical words. Nobody knows what they exactly mean, and that's why you can take them anywhere. We have to go back to our civilizational understanding, empirics-driven understanding. Our vision for social sustainability is Satta and Ahimsa. These are things that are being celebrated in our tradition from the times of before Buddha, Mahabharata, and to Gandhiji, all these times. We have to go back. This is a separate section on that. I'll just stop here. In academics, I'll tell you, cultural Marxists, why they call themselves woke? Because they have the critical consciousness. That's why they are woke. They have woken up. We are asleep. Right? Of course, I don't know what they will call a lapsed communist, sort of like my father or something. So, who again fallen asleep perhaps. But this idea is actually a Marxian construct. Right? The moment you don't see their theories, you don't interpret history in the light of your theories, you are in the wrong side of history. Right? The infidel sort of becomes wrong side of history. The believer becomes in the right side of history, progress. This is the sort of the way its construct works. The problem is that America, in academia, it was not a very, I'll complete, I mean time is over, I understand. I'll just complete in 1 or 2 minutes. American academia was a much balanced place before 1990s. What happened when the communist bloc collapsed? The Americans understood that there is no immediate threat from the communist side. But if they promote cultural Marxism in their academia, it could be exported everywhere, other civilizations. And they will kill all the civilizations. Of course, it is also killing the American conservatives in a big way. They are also big crisis. But probably, I don't know, they had their blind spots, I don't know. But this is what is happening. So first and foremost, we have to create a new social science. And unfortunately, the government last 10 years, they have not done much for that. That to create a social science free of these theories, free of original thinking, real critical thinking, not a theory-driven thinking, an empiricist-driven thinking. They should do much more about it. We have to cultivate the reality from a scientific lens, not from a theoretical lens. I, as a small person, have done my tapasya. I will do as much as my capacity is. It is up to the civilization, their representatives, the government. They have to do the rest.
More hands were going up, many more questions I'm sure, but we don't have time. Kausik, thank you so much. It's a very enlightening session, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for very provocative questions.